You have a story at Status Quo where you work, Louis, where you're a reporter. The EPA official, an EPA official, admits that it may be missing toxic chemicals in air testing.
Yes.
Tell us about this kind of confession.
Yeah, so this was at the same town hall meeting that I mentioned the information from the vent and burn. Again, too, this town hall meeting, it was fairly small, but you would think that other members of the media would be interested in it. You didn't even have to be there. There was a live stream.
Sure.
I listened to this, and there were three big takeaways. The vent and burn information that I just gave, that the EPA had only provided modeling for one car, but in reality, they burned 5. The other big bombshell here is what you just mentioned with the air testing. So these residential air tests is something that I had been looking into for a while, actually. A lot of residents had been very skeptical of it. Basically, what was happening is right after the vent and burn, when residents were returning home, the railroad and the EPA were doing, some sort of like double testing, we'll call it, where they send a member of the EPA or a contractor of the EPA, as well as a contractor hired by the railroad. The contractor in question here is a company called CTEH. They have a questionable track record at best of essentially going into disaster zones like this, oftentimes testing for things that they know they're not going to find to kind of move along and get this over with. Anyway, both agencies essentially come in, and the main device that they're using is this handheld air tester called a photoionization device. For short, it's a PID. Think a handheld like little gadget that's got a little pipe on the end of it that you can kind of, it sucks in some air and tests the air, and it gives you a result on a screen. So again, residents have been very skeptical of this because in their homes, they were smelling the stuff. In their homes, I was smelling the stuff. They were getting sick when they were staying at home. These devices basically have brought back the same results in almost every single home in the whole town, whether you're right next to the derailment or a half a mile away. And that result is generally 0.1 parts per million or less than 0.1 parts per million for a broad test for what are called VOCs, volatile organic compounds. So in this meeting, the EPA, though, admitted that one of the chemicals in question here that's been found in the heavily polluted creeks, and it was on the train as well, there's a chemical called butyl acrylate. So butyl acrylate, according to, several places, but Mark Durno, a representative from the EPA at this hearing, said that the EPA's kind of action phase for butyl acrylate is 20 parts per billion, with a B, parts per billion. And the device that they're using for testing, when you transfer it from parts per million to parts per billion, can only test as low as 100 parts per billion. So in other words, you would never find butyl acrylate at the action phase level with that device unless it was 5 times above the action level. Again, the action level being at 20 parts per billion, but where the device can pick it up is at 100 parts per billion. So that was a major admission from the EPA there. And then on top of that, in additional digging that I've done, I've spoke with folks on the record and off the record, folks who are, chemistry PhDs, toxicologists, folks who actually use these devices for work. And when I talk to the chemists in particular, they tell me that when vinyl chloride is set on fire, it turns into other things through combustion, right? So the byproducts of burned vinyl chloride, some of them are formaldehyde, phosgene, hydrogen chloride. And with this device, the experts tell me that you would never be able to find phosgene with that device. You're just not going to get a reading for it no matter what. With formaldehyde, you can only get a reading with that device if you have it in a special setting and have a special attachment on the end of it. I've seen dozens of these home test reports, and I've seen none with a formaldehyde test result. So that can pretty clearly tell us that they have not been testing for formaldehyde in these folks' homes. And in both of the cases of formaldehyde and phosgene, if you can smell the chemical in the air, it is already above the limit of which you should be exposed to it when you look at recommendations from OSHA and other similar organizations. Wow. Yeah. And for some crazy reason, nobody is talking about this. Nobody.